Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for this conversation with many voices discussing one vision today. We're going to cover what Maximize Northwest Missouri is doing and why, for those of you who are new to the conversation, and for those of you who've been on this journey with us for a while. Today is an update on recent and extensive progress. So we had hoped to gather in person in March to share the results of the work we engaged Dr. Sarah Lowe and her team to conduct, and then make some decisions together on how to best use our new communications platform and other resources. Then, however, the pandemic hit, and we all needed to take a pause, and I hope that you and your family and friends have remained safe and well over these past few weeks. This is a very trying situation, to say the least. So now that several weeks have passed, it's time to keep momentum going. We need to shift to consider the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and recognize that it's more urgent than ever that we act in new ways together to survive and thrive. We really appreciate your interest in being here today and enthusiasm for how to make our region better and stronger together. This map here of the 18 counties of Northwest Missouri shows that we're not all the same. We come to the table with many different perspectives, needs, goals, and voices, but we are interdependent. Each of our communities needs each other to succeed for the region to succeed. And the conversation today is about finding some win-win strategies to create a common vision for the region from our many voices. This will require that we think bigger, beyond, and across our traditional lines of competition, help residents and leaders grow in their abilities to make a difference and get even better at working together. Northwest Missouri is known, and I'm sure you would all agree, in our state for how well we've worked together in the past. And now, in the pandemic, our region is once again showing a lot of heartwarming resilience by neighbors helping neighbors. So why this concerted effort to organize? Where did this focus on the regional vitality of Northwest Missouri come from? There was a group of leaders who care deeply about the people who live here. Back in the 2000s, it doesn't sound that long ago, but it was a while, that a majority of rural areas have community foundations that give people an opportunity to invest in themselves. That's a key requirement. And Northwest Missouri needed a standalone, neutral, supportive organization serving that purpose. So the Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri was formed. In 2012, the Community Foundation invited Tom Vilsack, who was then the U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, as the keynote speaker for their region-wide breakfast. And his call to action was that the area needed to plan and take action as a region. A transfer of wealth study was done, a regional vitality task force was formed, and conversations like this were held to include dozens of organizations and listen to those who live here about what they felt was needed to make life better. Then in 2016, several communities stepped up to participate in the first pilot of the National Learning Collaborative on community leadership and planning. And now we have an expanded team of people, organizations, and communities who are helping a core group of people apply what was learned and put together a simple and relevant framework to support regional collaboration. To reflect how much the Regional Vitality Initiative has listened, learned, and changed through the pilot, thanks to all involved, the effort has been rebranded as Maximize Northwest Missouri. Within the umbrella of the Community Foundation, Maximize Northwest Missouri serves as the neutral entity providing essential administrative, communications, information access, and leadership advancement support for regional vitality efforts. We are in the midst of a time like no other in our state and in our country, both before COVID-19 hit and after, with many entities concerned about and willing to invest in innovative ideas to help rural communities. We are so thankful for USDA Rural Development, the state of Missouri's Department of Economic Development, Evergy, and several other private donors for helping with some seed funding. Everyone else's partnership is appreciated as well, with the investments of time, energy, indirect costs, and lots of expertise. We know that there are many more of you in communities and organizations who share a vision of vitality for the region and are interested in making it the best it can be. This will require three things based on our research. Seeing where we are now as a region, which is today's presentation by the University of Missouri Extension, believing that we have a new and better reality and it's possible for the region to think a little differently. Doing by taking action is the third. Collectively to create the future that we want. This is what we invite you to be a part of in our efforts starting next week and throughout the summer and throughout the next several years. Maximize Northwest Missouri's framework is a guide to facilitate quick wins and long-term transformation by aligning attitudes that drive our actions. So admittedly, some of you on the line have been a part of this. This pilot has not always been easy, but progress that really has the potential to make a major difference never is. This is just a list here, a small sampling of what has been learned. And there are also some of the most promising practices listed here across the globe for community engagement and development that we've looked at. People who have a wide range of different perspectives and experiences benefit from having a vision and framework that provides focus, a common language, and direction. Building leadership capability and capacity is not always second nature. Leaders here have said that they want and need more development opportunities on a wide range of topics. People also want answers to the what and the how. So that is especially true in rural regions where resources are stretched like ours, and people often really just don't have enough time, money, energy to act any differently than we do right now. We also know how important it is to engage all ages in the process. Everyone's voice is valuable and we want them all in. Communities also often focus only on their weaknesses and what they don't have. And so an asset building approach along with performance improvement is a much more productive balance with that dynamic. And also having reliable in-depth data that translates to opportunity is very helpful. Overall, we found more communication among and between organizations and communities. That's the #1 thing, would really help people better understand each other, dream together, and build the relationships to take action together. So you may be saying to yourself, and I've heard this several times, that we already worked together very well, and I'm not interested in adding more to my plate, or there are many ways to collaborate. Why use this framework? What's going to make Maximize Northwest Missouri any different than what we've done before? And the answer is this. It's about the preparation. It's about the unique lens of looking at and understanding rural regions that are located between larger urban areas like we are. And it's the commitment to long-term problem solving and regional vitality through a neutral supportive team that puts you in the difference-making seat instead of a small team flying on its own. There are lots of effective approaches for producing immediate and relatively short-term goals, and we support all of them. However, a comprehensive framework that is familiar to and used by all entities within communities, and especially across a whole region where we're trying to cover a lot of geography, that ensures federal, state, local, and private sector efforts are aligned and integrated to maximize their benefit and impact is unique and it's needed. This realization has rung true here in Northwest Missouri as well as across the country, and it's more relevant now than ever. So we had a team of approximately 24 representatives, some familiar with and some who are new to the table from across the region, choose the monarch butterfly as a way to represent this work. And like the monarchs, our population is challenged. In the case of the monarch, a concerted effort of many people learning about ways to help, along with slightly changing some of the habits they didn't realize were causing a problem, and the resiliency of the monarchs themselves, we are slowly starting to see their population stabilize and rise again. We in Northwest Missouri here live in a beautiful region in the heart, soul, and crossroads of the country, and I really think that the same can happen for us. So with a full picture of a resident's experience in mind, we are including and uplifting all of the current programs and investments being made that are making a difference. This is not about duplicating anything, and it's all about connecting and expanding what we already have. It is a simple framework that guides communities in the region through a repeating growth cycle, and like any good navigational system, it includes a lot of helpful information and tools for people who are committed to the journey. Maximize Northwest Missouri exists to help local communities and the region recognize opportunities across map lines, make decisions together that are informed by facts and the experiences of people, and help change our economic situation for the better. Progress requires all of the major sectors at the table. We've summarized them into what you see in the center here: health, economy, education, and quality of life. And in looking at the outer circle, you can see that there are many more areas of each of these that should be included. And regardless of whose specific priority is put into the center at any given time, it is interdependent on all of these people in some way, shape, or form. The whole idea is to empower leaders such as yourselves to maximize win-win opportunities, and we want to include as many perspectives as possible. The path is designed to help move shared activities and goals from reactive to proactive to aligned and integrated. Do you see how all of those arrows representing different interest areas move throughout the process? This is about local and regional communities respecting individual interests while working together on shared needs. It doesn't happen overnight or with the stroke of a magic wand, but it can and does happen when people are willing to gather and think innovatively about what they share. So when talking about how to best invest resources for the betterment of the whole region, the borders that we draw on maps and in our minds just don't exist. Roads run through, we've got weather flowing through like the wind today, and people move through and within the region without regard for those boundaries, just like the monarchs do on their migration. But before we go any further, I want to acknowledge that several groups within the region are working on the region. And what Maximize Northwest Missouri's navigation team really wanted to know recently is how similar are the strategies and priorities of these groups, especially as they relate to fostering innovation. Also, do we have a good starting spot that helps people jump ahead faster and include a lot of voices and perspectives from the onset? We're happy to report that the answer is yes to both of these questions. And we have welcomed Dr. Sarah Lowe and Hannah McClure from the University of Missouri, MUExceed, to look at a lot of the existing work, do some interviews, visit with some of you specifically working on entrepreneurship and innovation, and share their findings and recommendations to these initial map reading tasks of figuring out where we are, understanding our surroundings, and getting our bearings. Thank goodness we have a lot more to go on than the early explorers and pioneers that I pulled this map from. But once they are finished with their report for us today, we're going to ask you to help decide which way to turn from here to get where we believe that we all want to see our region go, which is a region that is thriving and maximizing our potential. So I'm going to switch screens here now with Dr. Sarah Lowe, and she's going to share, along with Hannah McClure, some of what she's doing.
Thanks, Crystal.
You're welcome. Did that work for you?
Yep.
Great.
Well, I appreciate that great intro. Let's just dive right in, kind of where Crystal left off with our regional history. And as you all know, the region is rooted in agriculture, and the region has also participated in all of the different waves of economic development. Okay, so let's look back to right after World War II when we had the industrial development or smokestack chasing wave of economic development, right? So factories, for example, were lured to rural areas like Northwest Missouri for inexpensive land and labor. Following that, as we got into the late 70s, early 80s, farm crisis, and also offshoring. Land and labor became less expensive abroad. And so some of those industries, some of those manufacturing plants left the region, and the region kind of picked up, like many other regions across the US, and focused a little bit more on business retention and expansion, working with individual firms and keeping them there and growing those individual firms. The third wave of economic development, starting in the 90s, really focused more on entrepreneurship and growth from within. That third wave focused on things like public-private partnerships, human capital, building on the knowledge and the strengths of the individuals in the region, looking at industry clusters. And the third and fourth waves, all of these waves are still ongoing right now, but the fourth wave, the most recent wave, has focused kind of growing on that human capital piece on quality of life and sustainability. What is a sustainable economic development strategy for your particular region? And quality of life has really become important because that's what drives where people are locating, where people want to live. People want to live where they have amenities, a nice quality of life, maybe good schools for their kids. So today, as Northwest Missouri is looking in the face of population decline, that has led to labor force participation dropping. And of course, that leads to a lag in output, or GDP, kind of the economists' measure of how well the economy in the region is doing. So with that, I want to just focus a little bit on this chart. It's a little bit of a complicated one, but it's called the components of population change. The black line on the chart shows that over the last business cycle, since the end of the Great Recession, every year Northwest Missouri has had a little bit of a contraction in terms of population. So that black line is below zero every year. The red part of each bar is net domestic migration. So that says to us, we're losing people from Northwest Missouri to other parts of the US each year. On the positive side, above zero, we have increases in the region, both naturally, so we have more births than deaths. That's a really good news. And we also have some increases to the region from international migration. So we're gaining more people from international migration than losing people to international migration. So the question is, how can entrepreneurship, or how can the next wave of economic development strategies turn around this population change in Northwest Missouri so that our labor force participation can grow, so that our output and so that our economy can grow, and so that our quality of life can grow? I arrived at Mizzou a year and a half ago and was met by Mary and Max very quickly, and they were very interested in building an entrepreneurial ecosystem in Northwest Missouri. So what is an entrepreneurial ecosystem? It's a way of thinking about the environment in which a firm operates as opposed to a specific firm. So business retention and expansion, of course, is focused on one particular firm. Entrepreneurial ecosystem building as a strategy says, what do we have in our region that can help people get into entrepreneurship, help improve the quality of entrepreneurship, create competition, create a culture or buzz around entrepreneurship? And so there's lots of different factors that go into this entrepreneurial ecosystem. And these ecosystems vary across every region, right? But things about like financial capital availability, human capital, we already talked about talent and human capital, about how important that is. Market access, your proximity to Kansas City and the rich interstate highways and highways you have in the region. Community culture of collaboration, or a culture of acceptance of entrepreneurship or acceptance of international migrants. These are all parts of the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Northwest Missouri. So today, my colleague Hannah McClure and I are going to talk about some research that we did for you at the request of the Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri, and of course, Maximize Northwest Missouri. We were asked to conduct a synthesis and objective analysis of the prior studies that you'd had done and their recommendations. We looked at the 2015 Regional Entrepreneurship Assessment and Strategy Study conducted by Southeast Missouri State University. We looked at a suite of products produced by Don Mackey with E2 Entrepreneurial Ecosystems. Those were done fairly recently. We also looked at all three SEDs in the region with an eye towards entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial ecosystem building. And kind of as a bonus, we decided we needed to do some additional context research. And so many of you participated with Hannah and myself on interviews, giving us additional context, helping us learn about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in your region. And for that, we are very thankful for your participation. So we're going to kind of go through the lessons learned from these different reports, talk about what we learned from the bonus research, and then kind of give you our recommendations as regional economists. And then we'll turn the floor back to you, and you will decide what you as a region want to work on next. So let me start with the Southeast Missouri State University report. This was a very nice report. This report that we reviewed was the consolidation of the 3 sub-regional reports. So each RPC kind of had a report, and we looked at the whole enchilada in this report. Very robust research methods for this report. There was focus groups. Many of you probably participated in those. There was a survey. There was also quantitative data analysis. And that quantitative data analysis focused on innovation. It focused on cluster analysis, identifying clusters in agribusiness, biomedical, fabricated metal production, and a cluster in education. Although I did want to note that the education cluster is actually below the US average. Those other 3 clusters are above the US average. So a very nicely done report. It had a suite of recommendations, 10 recommendations focused around 5 areas. And so those 5 areas of recommendations were developing a pipeline of entrepreneurs, both in terms of youth entrepreneurs, getting youth to think about entrepreneurship as a potential strategy, and also adults, getting adults to think about entrepreneurship as an alternative to wage and salary employment, for example. Technology and innovation was a set of recommendations. There's been a lot of interest in the region around ag tech and technology. Improving financial capital access for entrepreneurs was another set of recommendations. The networking and collaboration, there was a set of recommendations around mentoring and networking programs, and the regulatory environment. Going through that report, thinking about it, thinking about the region, doing some data analysis about the region, our recommendations coming from this report were that you continue to support or perhaps implement the following recommendations from CMO. Certainly the recommendations around growing that entrepreneurial pipeline. Training, curriculum, there's a lot of good work in this area already going on in Northwest Missouri. And so we'd like to see that continue, fostering that culture of entrepreneurship, fostering people doing things differently or doing things in a new way. We have to be supportive of that to be an entrepreneurial and innovative region. Support for the existing incubators that we already have in the region. Developing strong entrepreneurial networks and collaboration. This is already a real strength for the region. We just need to be cautious that we're not duplicating efforts and better collaborating as a region for the whole area. I would love to see more of that regional collaboration. And celebrating open-mindedness and cultural diversity. You know, looking at the research on entrepreneurship, the communities, the people who are most likely to be entrepreneurs are people who are new to a community or new to a country. So the percent of foreign born, the percent of migrants, these are the kind of people who are more likely to be entrepreneurs because they're bringing ideas from new places to Northwest Missouri. So a recommendation is to be open-minded and accepting of cultural and diversity, be accepting of migration, and that will build a culture of entrepreneurship, that will build that entrepreneurial ecosystem in the community. So those are the recommendations we really liked from the CMO report. The ones that we don't recommend pursuing right now were the recommendations around attraction and retention of IT professionals, developing new incubators and maker spaces. We've already had a fair bit of that in the region, and establishing new investor groups. These are great recommendations. They're great things to do, But in an environment where resources are limited, particularly post-COVID, right? I think that these are very niche fields for public investment. And we did perceive a lot of demand for these in our interviews that we did too. So I think that first set of recommendations would be kind of the best bang for the buck in terms of the CMO report recommendations. Don Mackey's work focused on the 3 pilot communities for communities of excellence. What I really liked from Don Mackey's work is that he focused on 3 keys to growing an entrepreneurial community: people, resources. So really Northwest Missouri, especially for a rural region, have quite good resources, quite good technical assistance and business assistance for entrepreneurs and nascent entrepreneurs. So that's from the region. His 3rd key to growing an entrepreneurial ecosystem are those networks. And again, I think you have very strong networks in the community, good networks, good mentoring of entrepreneurs. I think that of these 3 keys, what Northwest Missouri is actually missing is the people component. Depopulation makes that more challenging. So increasing the population and then encouraging the population that you do have to think about entrepreneurs, to be open-minded to entrepreneurs, to encourage people to patronize entrepreneurial or different kinds of businesses. That's kind of our recommendation from the work of Don Mackey on those 3 keys. And I really did like those 3 keys. Additionally, the E2 work kind of parsed out what Northwest Missouri or localities are best at. And he said localities are best at exactly that, the people aspect, finding and engaging entrepreneurs and potential entrepreneurs. And he said that other things are better left to the state or to bigger agencies. And so he made the example of MoSourceLink. Leave the curation of resources, engagement of resources, the testing of resources to DED, or he says explicitly to MoSourceLink, and suggests that the communities he's working with focus on that people aspect of engaging potential entrepreneurs. So again, just kind of wrapping up from all the work that E2 did for you guys, we recommend focusing on and implementing and continuing to implement these spaces for connection and creation of entrepreneurial networks. And by spaces, I don't necessarily mean incubators. Cup of Joe is a perfect example. That's a space. That's a space for entrepreneurs to connect, to share things, to be welcome. Those are the kind of things that I think come from the work that Don Mackey did for you that is easy for a locality to do and really good for a locality to do. So Maryville has started this, St. Joe has started this. It would be great to see that, maybe in some of the smaller towns in the region. Other recommendations from the Don Mackey work that we wanted to draw your attention to focus on attracting and retaining human capital, so that people component. So increasing the amenities, marketing the amenities that the region has. Placemaking is a little bit of a jargony word, but it's essentially making your downtown, making your community a place that people want to be. And all of those tie into quality of life, that culture, the placemaking. They make people want to be there, and they're gonna keep people in the region and potentially also attract new people to the region. Next, we looked at the SEDS, and I'm gonna have my colleague Hannah McClure talk about the next couple pieces of the research that we did. Hannah?
Great, thank you, Sarah. So again, we looked at the SEDS for the 3 regions in this 18-county region for Green Hills, Northwest Missouri, and the Mocan region. And we know that each of you already had plans related to economic development. So we really wanted to understand what goals you had related to entrepreneurship and innovation specifically. And this also helped us match our goals, our recommendations to your goals. So the great news is each SEDS already had goals and strategies related to entrepreneurship already written out. So that's what I'm going to go through next, just share and highlight those reports. Sarah, if you can advance the slide, it's not going up. Thank you. Okay. So for Green Hills, they had goals related to community and economic development and the rural quality of life. And they had relevant objectives too. So one objective focused on continuing to provide support and assistance to entrepreneurial startups. And another one was focused on the quality of life and placemaking aspect, really with the focus on building networks of art organizations and artists, and thinking about ways we can continue to coordinate them so they can contribute to the economy. This report, the regional leaders here also recognize they really want to focus on those locally grown efforts. Next, for Northwest, they really wanted to diversify their economic base and become a dynamic activity. This region had multiple goals and objectives related to entrepreneurship. To support their goal of grow and diversify the region's economic base and workforce participation, they had specific objectives, specifically develop a culture of entrepreneurial innovation and growth. They also address retaining and attracting an educated workforce and focus on value-added agriculture innovation. The other goals are related to tourism and increasing broadband access. And lastly, yes, and then MOCAN. So they have a goal as well related to entrepreneurship and really talking about connecting neighborhoods with business services and amenities and cultivating that entrepreneurial ecosystem. So they are focusing on providing financial and technical assistance to small businesses and those that have entrepreneurial business startups. And just to review all of the SEDS and objectives, again, we support all of their goals related to entrepreneurship and recommend that they continue the SEDS goals and Maximize Northwest Missouri, that these continue to be aligned on a regional level. And we recognize too, there are these common themes around quality of life, especially as it contributes to entrepreneurship. All right, and then the next piece I want to talk about, this additional context research that we conducted. So after reviewing all of these reports, Sarah and I realized we really needed to call stakeholders and facilitators in the region, the resource providers, and just get a better sense of what was currently happening around entrepreneurship. So thank you to those who participated. Through these interviews, there were several challenges and strengths that emerged, and so I'm going to summarize those into the common key themes that we saw. So first, some challenges that were identified, and we've talked about how the connections and coordination really is strong in the region, but some specific challenges that were identified were there's so many resources in the region, but there's also a duplication of resources at time. Or sometimes it's hard in that local context to find the specific entrepreneur and connect them to that resource. So it is a strength, but there have also been some challenges identified about that. Another challenge that was discussed is just the barriers shifting from a full-time job to making your entrepreneurial gig your job. So around that too, losing health insurance is a big risk. There were multiple individuals that said that specifically. So that transition from a part-time gig to a full-time job is a barrier. Then some other challenges that came up in our interviews. There's also a conversation about the people and culture. So mindset, the culture around entrepreneurship that we've talked about being a challenge. Communities or individuals want to remain the way that they are, or getting someone to see the opportunity around entrepreneurship, that can be a big challenge. There's also this recognition that the risk of failure, that can be a huge mental barrier. And lastly, another challenge was broadband access. And this person put it pretty well. If you have a town of only 300, you really have to have an online presence to be able to that online customer base. You're going to have to sell to just more than the people in your community. So having broadband access and the ability to ship your product outside of your community is an important thing. So there are also a lot of strengths that were identified in these interviews. Like Sarah has said, and we've been talking about, there are a lot of great resources for entrepreneurship already. There's facilitation groups and colleges and numerous things that people could easily list as a strength. Some of those specific ones were the entrepreneurs themselves. So there is a sense, there is an entrepreneurial spirit. There are ideas being shared. And another person also said, we are focusing on youth in our region. We want them to return here after they attend college. Facilitation is also a strength in the area. We know that there are a few groups, and people said we have boots on the ground. We have people available that people can go to and talk to in person. And they see that as a very valuable asset. And lastly, some other strengths in the region. Let me see. Are just the regional universities that are in the area. And people said too, they feel supported from the different universities, specifically around this topic of entrepreneurship. We see a lot of strong political capital and social capital. Again, those networks where people are meeting and discussing ideas, the cup of joe, the boss coffee. And we also do see strong community connections as well. Several people talked about the Main Street program and how their downtown is being revived, and they want to bring vibrancy to their area. And again, just this last quote, there's really strong collaborations in my area. A lot of groups work together rather than independently.
Thank you, Hannah. Let me just summarize our recommendations and dive into our recommendations a little bit more. Again, we think that focusing on marketing your existing assets, letting people know what a great region Northwest Missouri is, and investing in key assets that will increase the region's quality of life is a strategy that you should really think about. All these reports kind of touched on that sort of thing. So an example of that kind of marketing might be, working with local school districts to send a newsletter to alums, maybe who live in Kansas City, and let them know how great your K-12 school district is, what great things are going on in your community. Again, that cultural diversity and open-mindedness. Is your community, ask yourself, is your community open to new people and people doing things kind of differently or innovatively? And that placemaking. Make your region a place where people want to live and do business. Make your town, your downtown vibrant. All of those collective efforts help you work together as a region, as a sum of all those small towns and some of all those counties, help you work regionally to tackle some of the downsides like this population loss, and also build the positive things, build upon the great resources you have for entrepreneurship, and build your entrepreneurial ecosystem. Let me dive a little bit more into the population loss, okay? So this chart on the right, the top right is the one I already showed you, components of population change for Northwest Missouri over the last business cycle to the most recent available data. And on the bottom, we have the same chart for Missouri. So you can see that Missouri has a lot more natural increases in population, so a lot more births than deaths than Northwest Missouri, and fewer domestic out-migration, less domestic out-migration for the state of Missouri. So your goal is to kind of make Northwest Missouri look more like Missouri in terms of components of population change, and get that black line of net population to be an increase, to be above zero. And so I talked with several demographers and leading geographers in the country about migration as an economic development strategy, and they agreed that return migration, so going back to targeting the alums of the local high school, return migration is probably the most fruitful strategy for this. So let me just show you another chart. This is net migration by age. And so this pattern has held pretty constant for decades. And it also holds pretty constant for a lot of different counties throughout Northwest Missouri. But this particular one is just for kind of rural communities in general. And so what happens in rural communities in general in terms of migration by age is that we have young people generally leaving the community after they graduate from high school. Maybe they come to Columbia, go to Mizzou, they go out, they test the waters, they meet new people, they move to a bigger city. And traditionally, rural areas get bumps in two different age groups. They get that bump at the mid-career level, and there's another bump at early retirement. And so these two bumps are really age groups that you could specifically target return migrants. If you target the mid-career bump, you're also going to get the other bump, which is the young people. They're going to come back mid-career and bring their children with them. So that's a real potential target in terms of an economic development strategy is targeting those mid-career folks who are maybe from Northwest Missouri. Maybe they've moved off to Kansas City or St. Louis or Chicago. How can you encourage them to come back to Northwest Missouri, to their roots? And with them, they could potentially come back with business skills, with licenses, with education, with assets that can build the entrepreneurial ecosystem in your region. The other bump are the early retirees. And this is an area that Northwest Missouri has done pretty well in. You have a relatively good healthcare system, and so that has been attractive to early retirees. One thing you're lacking that early retiree migrants tend to go for are the natural amenities, lakes. So Lake of the Ozarks does very well in this early retiree net migration game. So those are kind of the two age groups to potentially target. Next steps, we really are recommending implementation. You've done a lot of research. There's a lot of research out there on the region. We're recommending that you take the momentum. We have 50 people here today. Take the momentum of you being here and work on implementation. So I don't think you need more research right now. You need some coordinated implementation of economic development strategies at a regional level. Northwest Missouri, Maximize Northwest Missouri, the Community Foundation has been very interested in entrepreneurial ecosystem building. And so can we develop a regional plan? As a group, we want you to think about what do you think of our recommendations? You know, we're not in Northwest Missouri. What do you think? You are the most important part of Northwest Missouri. But we encourage you to think about developing a plan, thinking about what you want to target first. Break that plan down into action steps and identify a person or a team who will tackle or commit to tackle each action step. Continuously evaluate how you're doing as you're working towards action steps. Develop milestones to help keep on track the action and development of those action steps. And then select metrics and evaluate how you're doing continuously. So those milestones, those metrics will really help keep you on track in terms of implementing strategies to help the region go where they want to go next. We have fleshed out these ideas. We only had 30 minutes today, so we've fleshed out some of these ideas on a larger slide deck, and we've provided those to the Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri and Maximize Northwest Missouri. And I think Crystal is going to make those available to everyone. Think about what examples I talked about today that might be of interest to you. I talked a lot about the return migration. Okay, we talked about, you know, maybe targeting school districts. We talked about working more collaboratively as a region to avoid duplication of services. And we talked a little bit just here at the end about evaluation and be sure to take that evaluation very seriously. Stop investing in things that aren't making a difference. Don't be afraid to pivot your investment. Don't be afraid to say, as an economist, I can say, that was a sunk cost. We're going to pivot and invest more in downtowns or cultural festivals or places for us to connect with online, which might be, you know, kind of the road we need to travel for the next year and a half as the COVID pandemic hits the nation. Working together as a region on the bigger issues is also important. So broadband was a key issue. We've had a great investment from the state, from DED in broadband. We also had a $61 million investment from USDA on broadband this year. There's more money for the Reconnect USDA program in the CARES Act. So working together, banding together as a region on some of those big issues, and then tackling some of those quick wins. Those are kind of the sum of our recommendations. And I'm gonna let Crystal wrap up, but Hannah and I thank you for your time. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us. And I think Crystal will be making our slide deck available to you. So Crystal?
Great. Let me pop my screen back up here. Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of that. We know that just going through all of the plans that already exist are definitely, it's a worthwhile activity, and it just helps remind us where we've been and where we have the possibility of going. So I just wanted to quickly summarize again so that we all know really what we're looking at here. So over the past several years, many of you have identified entrepreneurship and innovation is important for keeping and attracting people to Northwest Missouri. The data tells us the same thing. The experience of experts that we've had the pleasure of listening to here today also have seen the same thing happen in other regions and agree. So the entrepreneurial pipeline requires more people and ideas. More ideas means more exploration of new businesses and expansions of current businesses. Going on. More people may also mean more companies opening headquarters or satellite offices and facilities here, especially after COVID-19. Diversification of location is definitely one of the strategies I've seen out in the national conversation place. More people also means more kids in our schools and adults needing ongoing education and workforce development and patients needing healthcare and residents needing all of the infrastructure, housing, and quality of life amenities that make a region a great place to call home. And I don't know about you, but that's a lot to think about. So how can we even begin when we're losing cash flow left and right in our communities due to COVID-19? This is definitely a question that we have right now. It's part of our reality. But to answer that, honestly, at the root of whatever decline we're going to experience and growth that we could decide to focus on, how livable our region is and how many people we want to live here, we're not going back to normal. So if we were going to go back and read through all of the feedback through the Great Northwest Day priorities process, I think most of you are familiar with that over the winter. Normal for us in Northwest Missouri has a little bit of work to do anyway. So why not focus on creating a new normal and work together on creating what we'd like our lives to be like. This is a big thing. So what strategic investments in our region will help us create a new normal that's better than what we have and what we have now? What will expand the use of and resources for the helpful entrepreneurial support organizations that we already have in place, because we have some awesome ones? What will build the essential technology infrastructure we all need to connect to the world and each other, as well as support businesses and new job creation? What do we need to do to encourage more people to build their lives here? Ensuring that regional vitality requires, you know, a lot of thinking and acting differently, as we've talked about here today, if we want different results. So to make our region vibrant and prosperous long into the future for our children and our grandchildren requires more than financial wealth. It requires more than just another organization working on something. It really requires a wealth of character and wisdom and ongoing commitment to working together. It's true that when leaders have gotten together in this region in the past, we've done a lot and have been a force to be reckoned with, for sure. We want to make sure that that legacy lives on and help all of today's leaders who haven't necessarily had the chance to be a part of those past region-wide efforts to be difference makers in Northwest Missouri as well. So I pulled out this little quote here at the bottom of this slide because as the Community Foundation's vision, this is part of their vision statement, reminds us, we believe our success in the future is based on our work today. And it is about today, not tomorrow. So we wanted to let you know that this work and you really matter in this conversation. There are several ways to get involved and find benefit for your organization and your community. And they just include, first of all, being an advocate for the work being done. Helping to look for what to stop, start, and continue is a really big part of this. Also connect more people throughout the region by getting more people registered from all of the different sectors. Remember that circle that we showed you, and communities online, so that when input is needed and we want more engagement in a conversation, we can quickly and easily pull all of those people together, all of those voices together. And by June, we will also be ready to support several more local communities who are interested in the supportive resources offered through Maximize Northwest Missouri. Sarah mentioned that the importance of having a step-by-step action-oriented process that goes through and collects metrics and milestones and all of those good things. That's really the meat of what Maximize Northwest Missouri is all about. But right now, what can we do today as we plan next steps on the strategic opportunities that we discussed? We're asking for people who want to continue into this conversation, because we only have this hour here today. But if you're interested in continuing a conversation specifically around the recommendations that we've talked about here, we've got a couple of slots open next Thursday and Friday. So 9 a.m., just a conversation with those who want to move this forward. And I'm going to ask for you all to kind of share in the chat some of your thoughts on this. And I'm going to ask Sarah and Hannah to help kind of monitor that. But we'd like to know what you're thinking about this. And we'd love to have you email us at together@MaximizeNorthwestMissouri.org. which one of these days and times that you're available, so that we can start to move this forward, and we're ready to facilitate that. So before I kind of open this up to the last few minutes for question and answer, I have a quote, and we've all seen this quote in a lot of different organizations in a lot of different ways probably over the years. And if you haven't, I'm excited to be able to share it with you. But it's never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed, and we've added 2 words, empowered and organized citizens can change the world, because indeed it is really the only thing that ever has. And the 2 words that we've added here, empowered and organized, are the hidden keys. Our region is so blessed with thoughtful and committed citizens. You're all here today. Maximize Northwest Missouri seeks to provide you with the empowerment and organizational support to shape the seeing and the believing and the doing of our action and of our region's potential and opportunities. So do we have any comments out on the chat at all? I think I actually have to move.
Becky Cleveland had a comment about the return migration as a strategy, and that she's been trying that for a while. Becky,
Okay.
do you want to say anything to the group about that?
Well, I think a lot of us see that as a strategy, and we've been working on it. I know Daryl in Marceline has been working at it. I know a lot of us have talked about it and really have developed strategies. But as I said, at the end of the day, maybe I'm just not seeing it, guys. Somebody needs to show me. But as an economic developer, I just feel like we're pulled to the attract a business versus attract people. I know we talk about it a lot, but still that seems to be where the dollars go. So to me, I feel like that's a continuing struggle for us.
That makes sense. Yeah, it's really about about helping everyone stop spending on the things that aren't working and get to work on the things that really have the most potential for us. So it looks like Chad here is saying that appreciate the efforts and support. That's awesome. One thing that's been apparent through the pandemic is the importance of food and the lack of farm to consumer operations in our region. I'm wondering if we will see other parts of the country invest in local infrastructure to better support their own communities' food needs. And that's a fantastic comment.
Can I just
Sarah, do you have
respond
any
on that?
insight?
Yeah, I actually was just on a phone call with Commissioner Muck from Lynn County this morning, and we were brainstorming with the Executive Director of Missouri Farmers Care about what sort of infrastructure we need. You know, we were talking about, can we put a freezer for meat in every county extension office and make the county extension offices a distribution point? Can we foster and encourage and support our local state inspected meat processors to help them increase capacity, both the immediate capacity right now where we're literally euthanizing hogs, we're euthanizing protein, we're throwing protein away while others are hungry, both that immediate need, but also long term. My graduate research assistant, Maria Coons, and I were talking to a locker owner this morning, and he was saying his sales have gone up from 5,000 a week to 47,000 a week. And he was saying, you know, what can we do to keep about a third of that? If he could keep a third of that increased sales, it would really help him, and it would really increase the direct to consumer or the local and regional food, and provide that diversity to the food supply chain that helps us get through these pandemics. So we are, MU Extension is partnering with some of those folks to come up with ideas. We're in touch with Senator Hawley's office. So if you have any ideas, please email me. But that's a great comment. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great one. I have another one here that says, I've always felt that the rural does not market the benefits of sustainable living enough and needs to be talked about more. That's from Ellen Griffin, and that's a great comment. There are so many things that we have as assets here and opportunities here that could certainly be a part of a marketing campaign, as Sarah had mentioned. So I think that's definitely one thing we want to move a conversation forward about, is how do we just better market our region? And if so, what do we want to have a part, key highlights within that campaign? So there's another one here. Do we have a list of all the existing collaborations and networks that already exist? And we need to know what's going on in the region. And Linda, I'm so glad you've asked that, because we do have some of that, and we're continuing to build more content for the website. And that website for all of you, again, it's just MaximizeNWMO.org, and we'll share it here as our final screen again. But on that, the whole idea is that becomes a portal for the region to not only help market, but really be a resource for everyone in the region, and sort of a one-stop shop to connect to all of the other things going on. So that's part of that communication lessons learned thing that we had. So we want to make sure that continues. So we're going to need some help with that. We're going to need all of you, telling us what needs to be posted and keeping it up to date. But right now, that's part of the support that Maximize Northwest Missouri is about. We're here to help do that because honestly, nobody else has the time to do it right now. So that's one of the ways that we want to be able to help. Let's see, I'm just looking here through the chat to make sure we catch anybody else. Subash just says that I would be happy to share more thoughts from the Missouri partnership perspective, and can make the 7th or 8th work. That's great. And it looks like a few others as well are interested in that conversation. So I'm going to go ahead and just share my screen one more time with you to make sure you all have this information. I think I'm going to do that anyway. All of a sudden I lost my ability to do that. Can you all see my screen?
Yeah, we see your email. Yeah. It looks like it's behind it. There you go.
Got it. Okay, so I'm just going to scroll through this to the end. And, woo, that's a really fast slideshow. There you are. So, and I'm not sure that that worked again. So anyway, together at MaximizeNWMO.org. And if you also just hit MaximizeNWMO.org as the website, go ahead and register on there. We're monitoring all of that, and we look forward to having you in these conversations next week. So you'll get an email from me if you had registered for this, and hopefully we can get that coordinated. So again, 9 o'clock on the 7th and the 8th. One will probably talk a little bit more about infrastructure, and the other one will probably talk a little bit more about marketing and promoting and highlighting our region. So thank you so much, everyone, for being here. We're very, very happy that you joined us today, and hope that you're going to do well through this COVID-19 crisis, and looking forward to helping everyone do that. So thanks again to Sarah and Hannah. Take care, everyone, and we will talk again.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Crystal.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Well done.